Welcome to a new Harry's Garage video, and there are two cars to look at today, the two versions of Honda NSX. You see behind me I have one of the very last 2005 versions of the original NSX, and then in the blue corner the new Honda NSX, this technical tour de force. I really wanted to wait until I could live with this car for some time, so I've had both cars here for about 7-8 days, so now's the time to delve into the detail of them. And my original idea was to put the two cars together and see the evolution. There is no evolution going on here. They wear the same badge, Honda badge on the nose, and they have the same name of NSX, but they are chalk and cheese. The 25 years between these two cars, we have seen a technical revolution. So I'm not going to put the two cars together. I'm going to kick off with having a closer look at the original NSX, the 2005 car behind me. Okay, the first thing to understand about the original Honda NSX is why they actually produced it in the first place. And at the time, Honda's road cars were these front-wheel drive hatches and fairly mundane cars, although they did have VTEC in the arsenal, and they were, you know, cracking cars, but it was a long way from their F1 involvement. And the management at Honda thought, this is a bit mad, we're doing all this F1, being so successful in F1 with Lotus and then McLaren, why can't we produce our own real sports car that has the ethos of the F1, this driver thrill of driving in the car? So that was the reasoning behind coming up with an NSX in the first place. And they went really back to basics. They wanted to make a really light car, great power to weight ratio, but not overpowered. They wanted it a sort of delicate driving car. And a lot of people pitch this because it's mid-engine, it's directly against the Ferrari. At the time it was 328. They were looking at that, but it didn't have the involvement they wanted, and they thought they could do it lighter by making the whole car from aluminium and using a highly tuned VTEC V6. So that's how the NSX came into being in the first place, and a very pretty car it is. This one is a later car, so it's unfortunate that it doesn't have the pop-up lights. It has these lights that replace the pop-ups, these xenon lights, and they give this sort of slightly bug-eyed appearance. I'm afraid it's good old regulations. There were countries where you had to have your headlights on all the time, so they couldn't continue to sell pop-up lights, so they sort of became outlawed, and that's why we got these sort of lights. Does look good in gold. The original cars had a black roof and black pillars to give it this fighter jet cockpit look, and it's always slightly bigger than you imagine the original NSX, and this overhang is the only possible criticism at the rear. It just seems slightly heavy at the rear. I fear it's because back then it was very popular that you had to have a boot big enough to put golf clubs in, and you can in the original NSX. You can't in the new one, but you can in the original, and I just wonder if that's why it's so big at the back. Right, let's go and open up some of the flaps, and I'll show you in even more detail underneath the skin. Okay, let's open it up. Front. Boot releases in the door, and then the engine. Right, we'll start at the front. And I've brought a magnet with me to show how much steel they managed to get in this car. I've always struggled with these. There we are. Oh, come on, there we are. Now, if I use this magnet, you will see there, well, the bolt is steel, this is all aluminium. It is amazing how much aluminium they used in this car. And the other thing you'll notice is how open it is. There's no boot space, a sort of separate luggage space. There's your space saver in the front. I can see the road underneath there. There's the ABS sitting there, radiator, etc. It's not no luggage capacity whatsoever, but of course everything is aluminium. Right, let's go and have a look at the engine next. And the engine is, you can't see it at all, not like sort of modern days Ferrari and McLaren, they're all showing the mechanicals off. In this day, you have this strange parcel shelf. You can't see it from where you're standing, but there's a glass obviously between the cockpit and this area. But I lift up this sound deadening and expose the wonderful V6 VTEC engine. The VTEC was when they had this variable valve timing, so they could get good outputs from it, and the original engine, 3 litres, was 278 horsepower. It's wet sumped, not rather than dry sumped, but everyone loved this engine. Goes on forever, howls maximum power at 7,300 RPM, revs about just over 7.5. There's one more detail I want to show you. That's in the boot, because it's almost my favourite detail on the boot. There's a little flap here which I lift up and you expose the toolkit, and there's one thing I discovered on an NSX I couldn't believe, and that's the jack. They were so obsessed with weight in this day and age that Honda made it of aluminium. It's the only car I know with an aluminium jack. Steel bit in the middle, but beautifully done. I love how they have the labels, and there are also little labels saying, be warned that if you've had the car engine, this can get very hot, because obviously it sits above the exhaust. Anyway, enough of the details. Close everything up and let's go for a drive. Oh. It's cooking today. For the UK, this is high summer, about 28 degrees, so just going to have the air conditioning on a little bit, which I hope won't interfere with everything. Okay, well, stepping back in time when you get in here, put the window up. It's this swept back look of the dash, and the binnacle dash, two great instruments in front of me, tacho to 8,000 RPM, speedo goes up to 180 miles an hour. Well, we won't be testing that today, but if you've looked at a 328, this is the same look, that you had the dash sort of coming down into the doors. It's so similar to 328, and a glorious gear change. Oh, I've only just put it into first, but there's a notchiness and a mechanical sort of flavour to it already. And the other thing is the view out. This windscreen goes right down and you have this wonderful view out of the road. You feel you can almost see your toes sort of poking up. Utterly unlike other cars of the period. I can see the wings as well, just exposed through my sightline. Anyway, enough rabbiting. I'm going up to my favourite bits of roads, down the drive, let it all warm up, and he'll join me on some better roads, and where we'll just explore a bit about the performance of the NSX as well. Making my way up to the favourite bits of road, but even now I can tell this NSX, this is a 2005 model rather than the first 1990 when it first came out there. So I can sort of sense the differences. The original was remarkable really, because you didn't get power steering for a start. That was an option. I'm trying to remember if ABS was an option or not. I think it was standard at the time. It made standard from the start. Air conditioning was obviously optional. You got leather seats, I seem to remember. But it was a pretty basic car. It was £52,000 or thereabouts when in 1991. A Ferrari had just come out with a 348, and that was priced nearer to 70,000 times. You had one or two extras on it. So 52,000 actually put it more in line with a price of a 911 or some rather than a Ferrari. There was also the other mid-engine car of the period was the Lotus Esprit, which was sort of struggling on with this 4-pot turbo engine. Yes, it was light, but it was 220, 230 horsepower thereabouts, and that was priced right down about £35,000. So that's where NSX sat in the market. This later car, 2002, they got the lights. Actually, I want to wind back. 1997, they got the 3.2 litre engine. It went up 200cc, which is what's in this car, and that made quite a difference, more to the torque than the horsepower. You do notice just a bit more grunt, but mid-range with the 3.2, so it's worth having. 2002, the funny little lights came, pop-up lights disappeared, and this one is basically the last produced NSX, last year of production, and I can feel it doesn't ride quite as well as those original ones. They did stiffen up the suspension a bit during the period. I mean, it still rides very well for the sort of car it is, but the first one, 1990 version, was exceptional. It really breathed with the road. It also had narrower tyres than was on here, and yeah, tyres were an issue. Friends NSXs, when they were new, they knew their tyre fitters very well. You were talking about 3,000 or 4,000 miles for a set of rears, and it was a real problem. It was actually just the setup of the car. It had quite a lot of towing at the rear. It set it up to be this driver's car. Everybody talks about how drivable and easy they are. Well, they are to a certain extent because you have all the controls. You have the Honda layout, the easy controls, etc. But the handling had a finesse to it, and they wanted to challenge the drivers to access the ultimate thrill and ultimate limits of the vehicle. You needed to know what you were doing. The steering wasn't quite as quick as you'd like, and it had it didn't have the power oversteer that we sort of know today. It just had a balance. You tuck it in, and then you just feel the back end corner just dip, and you just sort of slightly put opposite lock on, but only because of the way the chassis was behaving as it went round the corner, and nail it out. But if you were unwary and eased off or something, you were through the back hedge backwards. And there was quite a lot of NSXs who did that in the period. They sort of tied it down a bit more this later model. They also introduced a 6-speed gearbox. What I love about the gearbox is it's low geared. I'm just popped it into fourth, and I'm doing about 50 miles an hour. So how many 50 miles an hour I'm doing now? I'm doing 40 now in 42,000. So it's low geared. You get to use the gearbox, and what a delight of a gearbox it is. Just short, sharp, nothing like what mid-engine cars used to be. Go try a Lotus or something. They're not like this. Really nice gear change. And the other thing to remember, obviously, is the engine is transverse gearbox on the side. 458 for Ferrari introduced the longitudinal engine. It went 328 was transverse, 348 onwards went longitudinal. It's trickier doing the gear change then because the gearbox is behind the engine. So yeah, it's not as nice a change as this. This is one of the highlights of this car. Right, nearly my favourite bit of road, and we'll go into a bit more detail, up the speed a bit. Another thing that this car almost introduced was the sound of the engine inside the cockpit, because what you hear is induction. It's a lovely V6 bar with induction power. It's not exhaust. It's crisp, instant throttle response, and it's something that makes the NSX actually very special. And you know you're in an NSX. It can't be any other car. And you just can't help but change gear. Sensitive to white lines or narrow tyres. I can just feel the campers. This being a later car, it's power assisted steering, not the manual setup. Because its torque's so low. Original's 209 pound-foot. This one's 230 or something around there. I mean, tiny figures compared to today. Here's the balance, and the view out is just magnificent. I just sit there, it doesn't have that lockdown feel. If I go through a series of corners like this, there's movements, a bit of roll. I feel the weight transfer around there and make the most of it. It's like as I get the weight on the rear, then I can power up. Different sort of drive. You have to be aware that you have to go with it. It's not a grip master, the NSX, original one. You have to drive it. You have to be aware of the weight transfer, and that's why it proved so popular with true drivers in its day. It's a shame, really, that it stayed in production so long. because it hit its peak in those early mid-90s, and then I can remember being at Evo thinking, oh, what have they done to the NSX? Why don't they just kill it off and do something with it? And they'd do tiny little things to it, and it became more and more niche. And as Ferrari then introduced, by the time this car was in production, they had a 360 and a 360 Stradale. They're 400 and something horsepower. This is still at 280 horsepower, even with a 3.2 engine. So he sort of stayed on a bit too long. Price didn't move that much. This 2005 model was priced 60, 62 thereabouts. About exactly the same again as a Carrera 2, 911, something like that. But you had to be a slight oddball to buy the NSX. It wasn't a very, you never saw them on the roads, and it was it was great to see. But it stood for something, the NSX. It stood for Honda engineering, that aluminium, use of aluminium, that VTEC, that bark, that precision, the durability. We won't mention they did a 3-speed automatic version and a target top. That wasn't a good idea. I also ought to mention the Senna connection. Senna did drive it. He was in Japan to drive an F1 car on their test track, and the engineers asked him, "Want to drive an NSX?" He said, "Sure." And he came back, and his summarise of the car was it felt a bit fragile. He felt it needed stiffening up, not the suspension, the actual structure. So Honda decamped to Nürburgring and went through and managed to get a 50% rise in stiffness in the chassis before release. So that was Senna's involvement. It wasn't deep into the development, but he did have a go, did have an effect. Just his favourite bit of corners, I have to give it a bit of credit for a corkscrew. There's a crude traction that came in this early one. I've got it turned off at the moment, but yeah, it was the first signs of traction controls coming into cars. Anyway, so a delightful car, very different, as you'll see in a moment, to the new NSX. So I think I ought to stop it there, and then we'll go back and get the new NSX and put it down the same bit of road and see how much technology has changed over the last 25 years to produce a very different car.